From Transport Topics in Washington, D.C., this is RoadSigns. And now here's your host, Michael Fries.
Thank you for listening to RoadSigns, the podcast series from Transport Topics that explores the trends and technologies that are shaping the future of trucking. In this episode, we ask, what is the industry doing to train and prepare truck drivers? What are fleets doing to attract and retain drivers? And how is technology playing a role? We'll set out to answer those questions in this episode. We'll speak with Shelly Dellinger from Cargo Transporters for the fleet perspective. But first, let's discuss the technology side with our first guest, John Kearney, founder and CEO of Advanced Training Systems. Welcome to the show, John.
Thank you for having me here. I appreciate the opportunity.
No problem at all. You've been in the industry for more than 30 years, and you have a background in training as well. And with Advanced Training Systems, you're using simulator technology to help train new and existing drivers. And you worked with CDL training facilities and trucking companies with this technology. Just from your perspective, how the two markets that you work with, how are they benefiting from using simulator technology?
Well, the advances in simulation have been tremendous. Many years ago, if you had a simulator, it was probably in a closet somewhere because the technology wasn't there to really make it work. Today, simulation is a key to proper training. And from 25 years of experience in the training world, we realized that we needed that component of training in order to have the complete job done. Originally, the training was classroom. Then along came computer-based training, and then you went out and drove in a truck. Well, today you go get in a simulator if you're an advanced school, and you learn things that you can't learn any other way.
In that technology and using that, how does that improve the training and recruiting process in the industry? How are trucking companies using that technology? Are they using it to better train their employees? And in what capacity does a training facility use simulation? Do they use that versus the real life experience, or is it a complement to that?
Yeah, it's definitely a complement. You do need all of the pieces of training, including driving in a real truck, but you will learn faster and you will learn more if you work with a simulator. The simulator of any kind will give you reports so you know where you made a mistake. You may be able to see it on the video screen so that you see yourself making the mistake and correcting it. In advanced systems, you get to try it again until you learn properly how to do it. And in this age of the virus, more and more the simulation is being done without having to have people standing right by you so that we keep the distance. The way that simulation is used in training that perhaps enhances, let's say, is that if you were driving in a real truck and you had a front tire blowout, you would have a serious problem and a dangerous one. If you're driving in a simulator, you can be trained to handle a blowout with no risk to the equipment and no risk to human life. The same is true if an object suddenly is coming at you. The same is true if you're driving in a terrible storm, if you encounter ice. All of those kinds of things you cannot do properly in any other method other than a simulator. So both the trucking companies and the schools get a tremendous benefit from improved training. And when they make a mistake, they know they made a mistake. They have the opportunity to learn further and do it until they don't make that mistake. They actually can prove they learned it. And reports are produced. It's very hard to produce a report while you're driving down the road and make a mistake. You can do it, but you can't recreate it. So that's where simulation comes in. Young people are used to using simulation in all of their games. That's simulation. So if you want to attract young people into the industry, when they see a simulator, they know they're with a company that knows what they're doing, and they're an advanced company with their drivers. Drivers tend to appreciate companies that are moving forward. And that's simulation is, of course, a major part of that. The other thing is that in high schools, we're now seeing, and Patterson High School in California is a great example. They kind of helped start the program so that high school students can learn to drive a truck in a safe environment in a longer program, so they gain the judgment, and those people can go to work in the trucking industry. The trucking industry also uses training with simulation to correct errors when an individual has had an accident, has done something that is not appropriate driving. They use simulation to improve on those things, and also for continuing education to remind the driver of the tools that over time you tend to lose some of those tools. And simulation is a way to correct that.
With simulation technology, you can, as you were mentioning, you could customize that experience for the driver, whether it being continuous improvement or training new drivers. You had mentioned the younger set really gravitates toward this type of technology. Does that play a role in driver recruitment? And also a big picture view of it, what is the dilemma you're seeing with driver recruitment?
Well, that's a big subject. The one of the major problems is that you cannot get a CDL to drive interstate until you're 21. So many of the young people coming out of high school go to work at McDonald's or some other fast food service or the fields where they are hired. And they don't go directly into this industry. By changing the law that will allow an 18 to 21-year-old to drive interstate, they are allowed now to drive in their state, but not interstate across lines. So if we can get legislation to allow 18 to 21 years old with a very adequate training program, much different than what an 18-year-old who may go out and get his automobile license. People say, well, I don't want to have an 18-year-old. Well, there are 18-year-olds that have good judgment, who make good decisions, who have good reflexes, and who can drive and take the responsibility of a truck. And we need to have a much longer training program, and the high school is the place to do that. So that's one of the problems of the industry is you can't hire an 18 to 21-year-old and let him drive a truck today, except within your state. Most truck driving does involve going across state lines in many cases. So that's one of the problems of recruiting. The other one, of course, is the relationship that an individual has with the company that he goes to work for. We're beginning to see the trucking companies that are more advanced will hire and train, pay for the training, or cooperate with a school to do the training so that these people are not in heavy debt when they start driving. The companies will do a much better job of determining if the individual is likely to drive alone, for example. We find that if a person goes in the military before they become a driver, they do learn how to take commands. They're better at taking direction. If we take a young person and get them in the industry early and treat them as a truck driver should be treated, I think we're going to have more people who will stay in the industry. And that's not the case today in many circumstances.
As a former military, I can attest to that. Just the ability to take orders. that's a trait that was ingrained in me when I was in the service. So I do agree with that particular assessment.
Join Transport Topics in celebrating trucking's frontline heroes. Meet Peter Lacoste, driver for NFI Industries.
It kind of feels good. When you do something of service, the job gets done, sure, but it also gives you a little bit of personal satisfaction, being part of the solution. I was always taught you get more if you give. There's more satisfaction in giving.
Watch Peter's full introduction video and meet other heroes at ttnews.com.
As for you were talking about, companies and driver recruitment, what you had mentioned, just the relationships, are those the major pain points when it comes to recruiting drivers, or there's something deeper or less suspect?
I think pay is one issue. There are many, many types of pay programs, but truck drivers have huge responsibility. They have very high value cargoes. They have to obey federal and state laws and local laws. And if they have an accident, they're in serious trouble. They have to meet a schedule of picking up their product on time and delivery on time. This is not just I'm driving a truck behind the wheel. This is a management position. And we need to recognize the level that a truck driver really is in. And this pandemic did help with that because people began to realize there's nothing on the shelf. And why isn't it on the shelf? Well, the truck driver is the guy we need to get it from wherever it is to the shelf. So recognizing the value of the driver. The next thing is maintaining the relationship with that driver. Make sure that he gets home when he has an anniversary, when his kids are getting out of school. Make sure he gets home on a regular schedule. The other problem is that historically, drivers would be gone on the road for weeks. Today, the companies are trying much, much more to get the driver home. If they can every night, if not every other night, they're trying very hard to adjust the schedule to accomplish that.
You had mentioned the effects of COVID, which has reached all parts of the industry. My next question to you was about the future of driver training and recruiting, mainly in the area of having a driver shortage. But I'm sure that COVID has affected that as well and put a hamper on things. I would just like you, John, just to elaborate on the future of training and recruiting, but also the driver shortage as a whole, and where do you see that in the next 6 months or a year or so?
Having been a victim that almost died of COVID, that has affected our industry and changed even the way training is done. You'll go in schools today and they're keeping their 6 foot distance, they're wearing masks, and it's very difficult to put several people in a semi truck without keeping distance. So you have a higher cost to train because you may only have one other person in the truck. The demand for trucking, one of the most serious problems is that we have an aging truck driver population. And that's why we have this, in part, why we have this demand issue, and also the turnover because of possibly poor selection of who will be a good driver and the way the driver is treated. What we need to do is, in order to reduce the shortage, is to treat those who are in the industry much better. And I'm not saying that the trucking companies don't try to keep them better, but it's a long process to make a change in a company that has 500 trucks or 10,000 trucks. That's a process that you have to go through to accomplish that. So the shortage, I believe, is going to continue for some time. I think if we essentially test the driver and evaluate him, and there are companies now that can do that, evaluate his likelihood to remain as a driver rather than work for 6 months and quit. I think if we make sure that the pay scale is sufficient, that they can have a reasonable livelihood. And that is beginning to happen. Compensation for truckers has gone up quite a bit. So if it's the right field for an individual, they should be able to make a good living. And further, we haven't publicized what the truck driver job and what a truck driver really is and what his future is. Most people think I'm a truck driver, I'm going to be a truck driver forever. At least their father thinks that. The truth is that you can move up in the industry. You can move into management. You can move into the individual that communicates with the truck drivers. You can, in Werner, the chairman of Werner started with one truck, and Werner has, I don't know, about 10,000 of them today. So we need to make sure people understand what the truck driving job is today, which is far different than what it used to be.
We've been speaking with John Kearney, founder and CEO of Advanced Training Systems. John, it was a pleasure having you on.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being with you.
In times like these, it's crucial to stay informed. Transport Topics is offering all the information you need to make business decisions in these unprecedented times. And in the wake of the many event cancellations and group gatherings, TT ensures a virtual way to consume business content and conversation. To join the conversation and stay ahead of the news, follow Transport Topics on all social outlets or by visiting ttn.ws/stay informed.
To speak more about driver recruitment, we're speaking with Shelly Dellinger, who handles marketing for cargo transporters and who is also a former director of recruiting for the company. Welcome to the show, Shelly.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem at all. One of the things I want to discuss with you right off the bat is just what are some of the hurdles in gaining, top talent drivers?
Right now, the competition is brutal, especially those similar to cargo transporters. Sometime this week, we saw the first of probably many announcements of driver pay increases, which is wonderful for the commercial drivers and the industry all around. But, it's like the wave at a stadium. Once one company does it, everybody else is going to follow suit just to try to keep up with the competition. And so we're seeing that just the competition for those top-notch drivers is, I would say, just brutal right now. And the overall marketing dollars from those companies have increased as we're all trying to backfill some of those seats that we lost or maybe were vacated due to COVID. And you don't really think about it as much, but we are in the midst of an election year. I don't know how you couldn't think about it, but some of those the marketing space that we have is being filled by those election ads. And cargo transporters' pockets probably are not as deep as some of those, candidate organizations or those PAC committees. So, we're seeing a lot of marketing space or ad space being eaten up by the elections right now, in a time when we really, really need to have eyes on cargo transporters or some of the other companies out there. We really need drivers in the seats. It's a really busy. We are busy right now, and that's a good thing for the economy and for us also.
I was just going to allude that you pretty much are busy. Definitely with the conditions that are going on now. You have a pandemic, and as you mentioned, there's an election. And on top of that, you're trying to fight for space to bring in drivers, versus the bigger fleets that are out there. Outside of a pandemic and, the election, how hard is it to get yourself known out there to grab drivers?
That is hard. We're in lots of different organizations, ATA, TCA. We try to promote our drivers, Women in Trucking, all NCTA. So we're promoting our drivers along with our company. And when you think of top-notch talent, you really do think of people that have tenure with a company. And with that tenure, obviously, there is some loyalty. And as your years increase with a company, you do gain probably some benefits that increase over time, vacation or paid time away. Maybe you're fully invested with your 401k. So all that plays into, that top-notch talent isn't really searching for you. You need to be searching for them somehow. And there is a certain amount of loyalty that goes along with these drivers that are top performers at their companies. So it is difficult at times to get your name out there. You just have to, plug away at it and find your niche.
And you mentioned niche. What are you doing differently than the top fleets out there? And once you get those particular people, how are you incentivizing those fleet drivers to stay on?
We started a campaign last year, Acres of Diamonds, Focus on Home, and that led us to really try to focus in on our terminals that we have located here in Western North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina, and the Charlotte area also. And we wanted our drivers to feel very connected to those terminals. The closer they live to a terminal, the closer they are to the freight, the more often they get home. Their trucks are serviced while they're at home. They don't have to, take a break or waste their time getting their trucks serviced. So that is kind of what we have been focused on, is getting those drivers that are in our backyard, so to speak, and grab them and pull them on board. And how we incentivize our fleet, I think you have to have a competitive base pay. You have to have late model equipment. You have to have a robust benefit package. You have to be, your freight has to be driver friendly. And when you have those things, you can then start incentivizing your fleet. And one way we do that is we have a productivity bonus. And our bonus was paid quarterly. We moved it to monthly, and hearing, some of our driver needs and that type of thing. And currently, our productivity bonus is paid out weekly. And we changed that because twofold. We were seeing, as we moved closer to maybe Friday, the loads were more difficult to cover for operations staff. And some of our drivers, based on a quarterly bonus, maybe they took vacation, or maybe something happened during that quarter and they were out. They may have worked 10 weeks or 12 weeks and then something happened for 2 or 3 of those. And so we felt like a weekly payout would be more advantageous to the driver and maybe help our operations staff in covering freight. And it has worked. Once we move from quarterly to weekly, on average, over 43% of our fleet earns it on a weekly payout. And also, when we moved from quarterly to weekly, we saw an 80% increase of those earning the bonus. So we felt like it's been a win-win, especially for our drivers.
That definitely helps out morale, does it?
Yeah, it does. I think it does. Sometimes, we have an annual safety bonus, and for something to happen to you in December, or at the end of the month or end of the year, that it hurts. It hurts your pride, your wallet, everywhere. And having that weekly payout really does, I think, help morale.
That just sounds, like some of the motivating factors that you're incorporating to, one, recruit these drivers and then retain them, and mixing in this sense of community and performance. Is that the particular philosophy that cargo transporters has when getting those drivers and retaining them?
Exactly. If you are engaged and involved in your community and you feel like your company is a part of your community, you're just a happier employee.
I kind of want to take the Mac review and all of this as well, with just the overall job market when it comes to drivers. Mm-hmm. I mean, have there been any trends, disturbing or encouraging, that you've seen in the last 6 or 12 months?
Oh, well, some information came out. The clearinghouse had disqualified 26,000 drivers, and only 21,000 of those drivers have not re-entered the workforce. And, that's disturbing. And we're seeing a number of drivers to leave for local drivers. There's increased opportunity for local, dedicated, last mile options. And we do have an aging workforce. We have it here, we have it industry wide. And, as people age, they want to maybe slow down, and having the opportunity to be home and still drive is very interesting to a lot of our drivers. And we do see a lot of drivers leaving the over-the-road market for a local type position.
You're just speaking about, drivers that are pretty seasoned, and their goals when it comes to work are different than maybe somebody in their 20s or maybe even 18, in some states, less than truckload drivers are allowed to be employed. So do you see any difference with the younger generation versus the older generation, which quite frankly is the majority of drivers that are out there? I mean, do you see any trends on that end?
I don't have any data to back it up, but I think our younger drivers are very interested in being home. The older population or older drivers, they got home for their child's graduation, a marriage, really big things. We have drivers today that, I want to be home for Halloween. I want to be home for, this dance recital or a ball game that, is a scrimmage game. So the difference is, as much as we talk about maybe family, the lack of importance maybe in family for our the generation coming up, I think they are realizing that driving a truck is hard on the family and they have to maintain some type of engagement to be a part of the family.
We're speaking about trends, but is there anything that you see in the future of trucking, or what you would like to see in the future of recruiting talent and drivers? What's that particular thing if you desire to see something coming out of the work pool and drivers wanting to work for your company?
Honestly, I would hope to see more women in the industry. And I think there is a time frame that people can get into the industry, or young women can do the job, earn great money, and still be able to gain the experience and maybe, not be over the road, but still continue to drive and have a family and be there for the family or raise children. But, we have several young females that work for us, and they're very optimistic about being able to raise a family and still drive a truck, and that's great. I would really like to see more women, especially young women, come into the industry. The money, you just can't make the money that our drivers make doing some of the work or doing the jobs that you find young women doing.
We've been speaking with Shelly Dellinger, who handles marketing for cargo transporters. Shelly, thank you very much for being on the program.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Did you know you can ask Alexa to open Transport Topics? In just 1 minute, you will hear the biggest trucking headlines of that day. Be prepared and start your morning off right with Transport Topics.
Before we close, let's take a moment to revisit our original questions. What is the industry doing to train and prepare truck drivers? What are fleets doing to attract and retain drivers? And how is technology playing a role? As we heard from our guests, this is a battle that is fought on many fronts. With competitive pay across the board for most companies, fleets are finding new ways to entice and keep top talent. They are providing incentives and rewards for performance. Fleets are also taking steps to ensure a healthy work environment for all employees, a perk that has been increasingly popular. In addition, training facilities are finding new ways to teach the art of truck driving. As John Kearney mentioned, simulation technology provides a safer environment to learn the proper technique without the liability of roadside mishaps. With this application, it provides a sufficient complement to traditional truck driving instruction. In the future, simulation technology coupled with autonomous driving could provide a major shift for the trucking industry, but only time will tell. If you enjoyed this episode of RoadSigns, please let others know. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. If my questions have sparked questions of your own, share them with the RoadSigns team or reach me on Twitter at Michael V. Freeze. You can email us at share@ttnews.com. We'll read them and respond daily. And of course, we'll be back in 2 weeks with more RoadSigns. Until then, I'm Michael Freeze. Thank you for listening.